Last week, there was an interesting development in aviation, specifically to the role of technology when flying an aircraft. That story involves Hong Kong-based Cathay Pacific, which is currently working with Airbus to bring in a one-pilot system for future flight. According to a report from Reuters, Cathay Pacific is working on the one-pilot system for long-haul flights, hopefully to bring it in for the future by 2025, if certified. Cathay Pacific is working on this in a program with Airbus called Project Connect, which aims to certify the aircraft for single-pilot operations when the aircraft is in high-altitude cruise. Regarding the Hong Kong-based airline's involvement in Project Connect, Cathay Pacific confirmed they are working with Airbus, but there have been no plans to implement them into flight as of yet. In the Reuters report, Cathay Pacific said in a statement, quote, "While we are engaging with Airbus in the development of the concept of reduced crew operations, we have not committed in any way to being the launch customer." Cathay Pacific also acknowledged the need for requiring extensive testing prior to any commercial implementation of the program, along with regulatory approval and pilot training, with, quote, "absolutely no compromise on safety." Meanwhile, Cathay Pacific isn't alone in looking into the system for future flight. It has also been reported that Lufthansa, the German airline, has been involved in the program, though like Cathay Pacific, Lufthansa has not made any plans to implement it. If certified and implemented for commercial flight, it could be a major shift for airline operations, especially those who operate long-haul flights. Often, long-haul flights can have a crew of 4 pilots, a pair of 2 pilots in the cockpit at a time. Each pair would have alternating rest periods, and often these long-haul flights could have 3 to 4 during a given flight. The general idea of the project would be to reduce the number of pilots deployed on these flights and reduce the number of rest periods for all the pilots. For Airbus, if it is successful in this program, it could implement it for the Airbus A350, giving it an added selling point for commercial airlines that are currently struggling amid the pandemic. We often hear of a pilot-co-pilot pairing in commercial flights. Single-pilot operations are often done in general aviation, along with some military aircraft. Now with the integration of more technology in the cockpit, it is now more realistic of a future of having one pilot in the cockpit at a time. Along with that, during the cruise phase, some would say there isn't that much activity involved compared to the approach and landing along with takeoff to justify 2 pilots being in the cockpit at a time. From the airline's perspective, it could be a cost-saving measure, just the number of pilots in the flight, but also potential savings in airline layover costs, especially when crews are deployed on long-haul flights. Given the current state of the COVID-19 pandemic and airlines' financial situations right now, this could be an even more appealing option. However, I can also see the arguments against this, especially the biggest argument of safety concerns. While airline pilots are increasingly being able to take advantage of automation in the cockpit, there is still a sense of need for having a pair of pilots to oversee a flight, especially a commercial flight with hundreds of passengers. In the case of airline pilots, they not only operate the aircraft, but also the managers of the flight, and some flight systems could be complicated, especially in a situation of an emergency, which could lead to mistakes with tragic consequences. It's a very difficult challenge to operate an aircraft in an emergency situation for 2-man crews, and one could imagine how overwhelming it would be for a solo pilot to assess a situation, communicate with the passengers and the air traffic controllers, and navigate the aircraft to safety. It's not an ideal situation for one person to multitask in, especially with many souls on board. While I could see cost-saving incentives for airlines, pilots could take an issue with this given the current situation of the pandemic and many have lost their jobs. And this could take away opportunities for flying for other pilots who are currently still working. Meanwhile, from the passenger point of view, the reaction may be mixed, but care about air safety will likely have an issue. What are your thoughts on Project Connect and having a single pilot system for the future of airline operations? I definitely would love to hear your take, though in the meantime, this has been Flights in Asia, highlighting the news and updates from the aviation and travel scene in Asia Pacific. Thank you for watching and have a great day.